And they work on these paintings, and when they are finished, they look like this. And it's amazing stuff. The artwork is just beautiful stuff.
He's probably the best kept secret at the University of Arizona, but if he's not careful, he's going to get so famous that people actually learn who he is.
The Valley of the Kings, for those of you who don't have...
To really understand who he is, you would have to come here, to Egypt's fabled Valley of the Kings.
The Valley of the Kings is in that specific area.
Regents Professor Richard Wilkinson has returned to this sacred place and nearby sites year after year for 2 decades. As an archaeologist, he has a profound understanding of a culture that was ancient centuries before the rise of the Roman Empire.
The literature of Mesopotamia is very pessimistic. It talks definitely and constantly about the afterworld and how sad that afterlife is. The ancient Egyptians, by contrast, talked about the afterlife to the degree that oftentimes people think they were obsessed with death, and that's not true at all. They just viewed the afterlife as a much happier extension of this life. The average Egyptian, as I tell my students, spent far more in preparing their tomb than they did on their house.
Although Wilkinson spends part of the year overseeing the UA Egyptian expedition, he teaches in the university's Classics and Near Eastern Studies departments to overflow classes.
Of the pyramids, they began to construct the tombs by drilling them into the sides of the cliff.
People love going to his classes. Everybody that I've ever talked to in any of his classes, they hate it when it's time to go.
You see here. What about the first line? How many parts of the human? I work with students who are getting interested in Egypt. They learn the basic hieroglyphs, to learn to read the inscriptions and things like that. That is one of the prerequisites, by the way, for working in Egypt. She's got her wings unfurled.
And they not only take his classes, but they then want to follow him like a Pied Piper, into the field.
And then as we move along, the students here, we have undergrads and graduate students on the dig. It's not as though they go into France or Germany for the summer. I know a number of students have told me that it was like visiting another planet for them because the culture is so very, very different.
And the heat.
It's a dry heat.
For somebody who's never been there before.
Every hour on the hour and half an hour, they call down the tube. Kawaja, Mayamin Fadlak, telling us to drink our water. Because I'm definitely a happiest in the trench. There's no question about it. The first book I actually ever read as a child was a book about the exploration of King Tut's tomb. So to see if we can find where those intrusive burials are.
Yeah.
Getting the human
Wilkinson's field experience began with the late Israeli archaeologist Benjamin Mazar.
The first dig I ever went on was in Jerusalem. One time I was working in the bottom of a really steep trench, and it was incredibly hot, and the students just wanted to get out of there. And Professor Mazzara came up and looked down into the trench, and one of the students called up and said, "Professor, what time is it?" And he just peered down and said, "I should think by now you are in the Herodian period." And that was probably the biggest thing I learned at that time. Archaeology is sometimes a way of life.
He's written 8 books on Egyptology. They've been translated into 19 languages. And most recently, he's renowned for his excavations of the mortuary temple of Queen Tausert from the 12th century BCE.
And we've moved over the other side of the valley to where the temples are located, and we're excavating a temple of a queen who ruled Egypt as a king. Very, very little is known about her. She is mentioned in Homer as being the king of Egypt at the time of the Trojan War. That's probably one of the reasons she built her temple right there is because she was the last descendant of Ramses the Great.
He has the ability to read hieroglyphs on the one hand and to get inside the culture. He has the ability to dig. He's an art historian.
This period of the
You're not going to see anyone, I don't think, in our line of work in archaeology who can do more and do it better and communicate it more effectively than this guy, than Richard.
That being said, it's no wonder his expertise is sought even from the great beyond.
I do remember the one lady who came up to me and introduced herself when I was lecturing in Southern California one year. And she introduced herself as the reincarnation of Nefertiti. And that was only interesting to me because someone else had done exactly the same thing the day before.